completely correlated with the degree that the individuals in the society are pathological. And so I think the only real solution, or the only fucking hope in hell all this has, is that the individuals who make up the country take up upon themselves the responsibility of bearing your own burden, discovering up your own impingements and your demons, taking up that journey of self-discovery and self-realization and self-acknowledgement, self-respect, and taking responsibility for your life and doing what you need to do to sort yourself out, become strong, put your life together, become wise, and I think that's the only fucking chance that this culture has of not flying off the handle in the worst way.
Yeah, or redemption of it, but I can say, like, definitely not as to a society as a whole, but at least one person deciding to make changes in their life. And I can even say that even if it's a small enclave of people deciding to, like, lead the way forward, is it just this path of influence that a group of people, hopefully doing something right but also doing something wrong, can bleed out into their local surroundings, and just the way that leaks out into other people choosing to follow something. And it's in the same way of, like, I've kind of wondered if people are in the same way that we sometimes train dogs. If perhaps as you have a younger kid, and this kid decides he's going to use some very derogatory language towards women, and you got to step in and just nub that shit right out and just let them know that shit ain't going to fucking fly here.
Yeah.
As it's just poor parenting. Just you're going to let your kid run his mouth. Is like, if he just views that as acceptable and okay, as like basis one is covered, and he's going to push the level on the next worst thing, and like it's just going to fly out of hand. So the small enclave of people, of whether it be a parent with their kid or an individual going forward and just nubbing shit out, or like setting a good set of guidelines for themselves by either having a good teacher or a inspiration to lead their way, is like just the cycle of influence on that, man. Yeah, I think we...
Well, I think you're speaking to an important point. I'm totally about to hijack some of what I've learned from Dr. Jordan Peterson's lecture series called The Psychological Significance of the Biblical Stories, which he decided to do based on the presupposition that, well, it's not even a presupposition, the fact that our culture evolved and was developed out of these Christian stories, essentially, and there better be something to them, or else there's nothing to us in our society. And so he went on this mission to unpack it. And anyways, there's this one story, I can't remember the specifics, but it's in Genesis. But basically, there's a town that's become corrupt. A city is corrupt, and maybe it's Egypt or something, or. But anyways, a town becomes corrupt, and God is going to, he's speaking to one of the, protagonists of whichever story. I can't remember if it's Joseph or Jacob or something, but essentially he's saying, I'm going to destroy this city because it's corrupt. And then the protagonist is talking with God, and he says, well, what if there are 30 good people in that city? Would you destroy the city? He starts negotiating with God, and then there's, in the story, the idea that God, and then, he spends the first 2.5, 3-hour lectures just explaining the idea of God and what it could symbolize. And maybe it symbolizes culture, and maybe it symbolizes you in the future that has to live with all of your shitty mistakes that you've made, and in a sense is a judge and an executioner, because you're going to have to pay for what you do now in the future, whether it's good or bad. And so you could think of God that way. anyway, so he unpacks that a lot. I would recommend the lecture series. It's amazing. But so the idea that God is someone that can be negotiated with is there, and then you can unpack that for a while. But
forever.
Yeah, but then anyways, he says, what if there are 20 good people or something like that? Would you destroy the city then? And God says,
does it go numbered?
It goes lower.
Go lower.
It goes lower.
Interesting.
And God says, well, I guess I wouldn't destroy it if there was 30 good people. He says, what about 20? What about 10? What about 5? What about 1? And so the idea, as far as Peterson's managed to unpack it, and I certainly don't want to take any credit for this idea. It's and I don't think Peterson would either, because he's trying to extrapolate what these stories might mean. But something like, well, first of all, not everyone is going to do this, obviously.
No.
And then second of all, the second part of the idea would be that not everyone has to. Just enough people. There just needs to be just enough people who are going to take on that responsibility to keep things rolling semi-right, keep things on a good track. And I think that's an incredibly optimistic idea, and it speaks to what you were just kind of explaining, that maybe if it is just enough people, even if only the people who will do it, it could be enough. And because you're right, because the way we're networked with each other is just beyond comprehension. Because, and you can tell because, you'll go say there's someone in your life who just leaves you absolutely exhausted and frustrated and wound up tighter than all get out every time you interact with them, even for 5 minutes. Maybe you have a 5-minute phone call with them and then you're done. Just, you might have been super in a good mood that whole day, and you have a 5-minute conversation over the phone with this person, and then you're just absolutely agitated beyond belief. And so that person's suffering, obviously, and agitated themselves, and probably experiencing untold amounts of inner torment. And then not only that, not that that's bad enough, but that literally leaks out, how you described, into everyone else that they spend time with. And it literally winds up skewing kind of the whole community, and maybe even the whole country or the whole world further down towards darkness. And then, but then this is almost also a quite optimistic observation, because that means that someone with the opposite effect could leak out that goodness into the community and potentially inspire other people to pick up the torch as well. And so I basically just said everything you said in a different way. But
one thing I've come to notice is a perspective change I've had from being a very angry little young man and walking around town with a frown on my face all the time.
That testosterone is some shit, man.
It really is. Or even, like, I don't know, I hope it's not teenage. Definitely some teenage angst, but just like...
Oh yeah, there's just validation for that, for sure.
But just walking around town and just frowning at people and being sour and shitty all the time, and just having people, like, kind of frown back at you. And, like, just kind of, like... having the moment to kind of like step back and look at my life and go like, man, like I am immensely unhappy and people treat me like shit and I'm fucking, it's just this is how the rest of my life's gonna go. This is gonna be a fucking rough ride. And I was like, yeah, why would I want to live in absolute fucking misery like this for the rest of my life? And I was like, man, like I would like to strive to be happy if I possibly can, and I will certainly have the ability to. And a change of hopefully through quite a few decisions, a change of outlook and attempting to be happy most certainly changed the way that I see people and I interact with them, and it changed my surroundings and the interactions that I share with people. And it's kind of interesting to walk down the street and just look into the faces of those who are passing by you, and I sometimes just wonder by the looks that you see on some people's faces, whether it be a happy or sad or a very just visually blank one, which I kind of could see being a nice normal media one of just, I wonder where that person is in their life or what their story is. And I wonder if just simply saying, like, someone's just like, man, I'm fucking pissed, and you're just like, well, tell me about it, Ben, and maybe just them getting some stuff off their chest is gonna clear that for the moment, and they're just gonna say, hey man, thanks for listening, and that's a day that's changed, and they're gonna go off on their way, and that's a day that just maybe like had an emotional flip for them, and that's gonna change them and their surroundings. And I think people putting in a little bit of effort, just like it doesn't necessarily have to mean you're gonna go completely out of your way to be a social worker for everyone around you. Like, no, but like just a little bit of caring with a little bit of self-preservation and a little bit of self-healing for yourself is going to go a long way.
And I think it is healing for yourself to interact that way, because I mean, it depends on what you want to be in the world. Do you want to be this black hole just sucking in everything and everyone around you into just absolute oblivion as you go down there yourself, or do you want to maybe have the opposite effect where you can kind of get caught on the upward spiral and maybe you change your attitude? You know, maybe you get up earlier and start cleaning your room, maybe you start doing some push-ups in the morning, maybe you keep your kitchen clean, and maybe you're in a better mood because your house is clean, and maybe you interact with everyone around you a little bit better because you have at least that weight off of you, and then, you know, next thing you know, you're in a better mood at work, and your coworkers are happier to be around you, and maybe you're a little bit more enthusiastic about your job because it's a little bit more like a game because you're there with friends and it's silly and you're making jokes, and then maybe you're doing really well, and then maybe you get a raise all of a sudden and a promotion, and you can get caught on the upward spiral too.
A promotion.
And then it can just really start out like that, and you can have the snowball effect working for or against you. And but man, people have a hell of a time taking themselves out of those black holes. I mean, a lot of people don't. A lot of people just go right down to hell and then die.
Yeah,
you know. That
you can be a prisoner of like many things in life, but I think it is one of the greatest tragedies to be a prisoner of yourself. And
there is almost no escaping it, you know. And so you can either resist that or you can embrace it and just be you.
There's certainly people who just got dealt some very shitty cards from the get-go, and like I feel very greatly for people who suffer from mental illness, and it's something I don't walk that road, but I think for some of those people that's very brutal. But if it's a position that someone has willingly or unwillingly or without their knowledge put themselves, and they're just digging themselves down, I think that just to watch people do that is, I think it's it's brutal. It's brutal, man. And I hope those people gain the ability to have third eye navigation in their life, to just realize where things are heading, and have the ability to dig themselves out, maybe even a wicked support system.
And people do also manage to dig themselves out, and it's amazing. I mean, fuck, being human it's a blessing and it's a curse, and well, fuck, I mean, and this is kind of one of the things that I learned from poker. Not that I'm very good at poker, but you can win with the hand you're dealt. You can win.
Yeah.
And even if you have a shitty hand, and it's not saying that it's going to be easy. And, you know, you got to be careful how many rules from poker you apply to life, because you don't want to go around just lying all the time to everybody about your hand.
Yeah.
But I think the lesson that you can win with the hand you're dealt, it's incredibly empowering. And so do you want to see the opportunity in your suffering, or do you want to see it through right straight to hell? And this is something I was thinking about a lot the last time I did mushrooms, actually, because being someone who spent a few years kind of wrestling with suicide and then coming out the other end, I was reflecting about what about me is different now that I'm not constantly thinking about killing myself, you know. And well, a lot of what's different is just the sheer fact that I went through that pain in a sense, and it was almost like a weird kind of rite of passage